Okay, hi and welcome to video notes 10.7 quadratic formula. This is the big daddy, the one that does it all. This method of solving quadratics works on every form of the quadratic. We've seen some that work if there's no a value, right here, or I'm sorry, no b value. So we've seen that value and we've been able to solve that by square roots. We've also seen all the factoring ones, so you can factor and solve it. But this one, without any to do, without anything to do before, as long as it's in standard form, it works. That's the great part about this one. Now, the downside, because everything can't be awesome all the time, otherwise we just teach you one method and call it a day. The problem with this one is it does tend to be the most on the calculation side. So where it always does work, and if you want to make it your favorite, you absolutely can. The calculations aren't difficult, but there are more. So this one is your default always backup kind of thing if you'd like it to be that way. Plus, there's a little piece of this b divided by, or b squared minus 4ac, which is the discriminant, and we've already visited that. So a portion of the calculation you should have already done a few times. So this quadratic formula, we're going to explore today. You do need to memorize it at some point. I probably will give it on my quiz so that you don't have to. But with that being said,
Okay, so I want to explore two of these examples, which are going to include rational solutions. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one here. So if we're looking at this, the first thing we should do before we use the quadratic formula is list all of the parts that we're going to be using. Anytime that you're going to use a formula, you're going to want to do that as in putting information in, listing it out. So let's do that. The quadratic formula is right here. We can see it clearly. Normally, if we didn't see it, we would rewrite it. Rewrite it for each problem. Really good idea to have it right in front of us so we don't make any common mistakes. But to list all the information that goes in there, we're going to list out all of our coefficients. Remember, we're only dealing with coefficients with the quadratic formula, never a variable. So our coefficients then are going to correspond to A, B, and C. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at what A is, which is 1, because we can't see it. B is going to be the -2 there, and C is going to be the -8. So we're going to take those values, and now we're going to go ahead and plug them into the quadratic formula where they go. Remember, what we're finding are x-intercepts, so I'm going to write x equals, right? It's going to be an x-coordinate, but we know it's an intercept. It's going to have a y-coordinate of 0, so we're going to write x equals, represent that. I'm going to put opposite b. Remember, this is opposite b. So if it's a -2, I'm going to write -2, or you can go ahead and write +2 there. I'm going to write that out so that you can see it. Plus or minus, square root sign, right? Make it kind of long because you're going to put some stuff underneath. B squared. So in this case, -2 squared. Put the parentheses, especially if you're doing it in a calculator, which can be tricky, so be very cautious of that. Put a negative sign, and then I'm going to have 4 times my a value, which is 1, and c, which is -8. Extend our square root a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and draw my line for my division, and I'm going to put 2 times my a value in this case, which is 1. All right, this point, it's done as in putting the information in correctly. I'm going to double check. I did. It looks great. As I move along, I'm going to simplify 1, maybe 2 things, depending on what they are, at a time. I don't want to go crazy with that because I'm going to make mistakes there. And that's usually, if you make a mistake with quadratic formula, it's not plugging it in. It's not getting it the right formula. It's the calculations or the simplification. You do too many and you miss something. So -2 times a -1 is going to be 2 plus or minus square root. So I cleaned up the outside a little bit. I'm going to clean up this right here, just left part, the -2 squared. That's going to be simple. It's going to be 4. This side I'm going to clean up as well. I'm going to go ahead and say 4 times -8, or 4 times 8, right? That's all I have to pay attention to, is 32. But these two negatives are going to become positive. So I didn't clean the whole thing up. I did a little portion of it so I don't make any mistakes. And then I'm going to take 2 times 1, which is going to be 2. All right, so moving along, let's clean up some more. Let's clean up underneath the radical. And then we're going to pause there and talk about the fact that that is your discriminant, and it should provide you some information. So if we're looking at this, our discriminant value is a positive 36. And we know the discriminant well enough to tell us that this is going to give us 2 real solutions. In this case, I've chosen this problem to be specifically, it's going to be an integer. So this will be an integer solution, a nice neat one. Okay, but that's what that tells you, that you're going to have two real solutions. We'll talk about complex and irrational solutions tomorrow with the quadratic formula. All right, so to continue to clean up, we now have to employ our radical rules or our exponential rules. Sorry about that. So we're going to take the square root of 36 or 6 squared. Either way, it's going to come up to be 6, and that's going to be over 2. And some of you might get weirded out right here, like, oh, what do I do with this? It's got a 2 and a plus and a minus and a 6. What this means, and we should be hopefully comfortable with it because we've now worked with the plus or minus sign, right? That happens when you solve with the square root, which is right there. If you can't see it, we solved taking the square root, which means we have to add the plus or minus. It just means there's two possible solutions. It can be this, a positive 6 for the square root and a negative 6. So what we get then is we're going to have 2 plus 6 divided by 2, and we can even write the word and if we like, and 2 minus 6 divided by 2. So we're going to have two intercepts coming out of here, which is what our discriminant told us, so we should expect that. So 2 plus 6, right, if we're keeping it simple, is 8 divided by 2, which is 4, and 2 minus 6 is going to be negative 4 divided by 2, or negative 2, and then we're going to turn those into the intercepts that they are. And with our rational answers, it's two nice pretty ones, actually integers in this case. So there's our two intercepts. What would we do with those? We'd graph them or apply the information, but we know what these intercepts are now. All right, let's jump to another problem. Looking at this example here, you'll notice that it's pretty close. It's a quadratic. It's got 3 terms. You can see all of that, but there's a problem here. We know that to use the quadratic formula, we have to be in standard form. And you'll notice here that this isn't completely in standard form, and we're not equal to 0. Remember, equal to 0 is like saying, hey, we're ready to solve. So first thing we have to do is take this 30 that's on the right side and go ahead and move it over so that we are in standard form. So we should end up with 3x squared plus 47x plus 30 equals 0. All right, equals 0 says I'm ready to solve. So we're good to solve now. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our part that we would do next, which is identifying all of the coefficients a, b, and c for this quadratic. So a is going to be 3, b is going to be 47, and c is going to be 30. At this point, we'll sneak back up, take a little peek at the quadratic formula because we don't want to mess it up putting in our coefficients into the quadratic formula. Remember, only coefficients, no variables at all. So let's go ahead and start plugging in those parts and see if we can get this going. So b then is 47, and so I'm going to put it on opposite b, so it should be negative 47 then, right? Opposite, plus or minus, don't forget that part, long square root sign. So b squared is 47 squared, and you're like, I can't do that in my head, Mr. Hallam. That's fine. This is where I'd employ a calculator. I don't know why you wouldn't. You could if you didn't have one, but throw it in a calculator. So 4 times a, which is 3, c, which is positive 30 now, and we're going to go ahead and divide that all by 2 times our a value, which is 3. Don't forget x equals, because these are x-intercepts that we're finding here. It points, right? So now that we've got that done, let's go ahead and work slowly through our cleaning up process, our simplification. Okay, so we're going to start simplifying next. This negative 47, we're not going to do anything with it at first. It's just going to hang out because there's no simplification. Under the square root, though, we're going to go ahead and square 47 with our calculator, find out that that's going to be 2,209. And we're going to have 4 times 3 times 30, which is going to turn out to be a negative because there's only one negative sign, minus 360. We're going to put all of that over 6 because 2 times 3 is 6. All right, so we did a little bit of simplification there. Let's see if we can keep that going. Next, this negative 47 still hanging out. Nothing to simplify with that. Let's clean up under the square root, which should give us 1,849 over 6. And you're looking at it and you're like, well, what do I do from here? Well, luckily we chose one that this square root right here is going to come out nicely. Tomorrow we'll deal with the ones that don't or have a negative number, but that's for another day. So for this one, if you take the square root of 1,849, you're going to find out that you're going to get 43. Okay? And just like the last one, we've got 3 integers that we can kind of deal with here. So we're going to go ahead and clean them up. And remember what this means right here is this plus or minus says that we're going to have 2 possible solutions that can come out of this, both a negative and a positive of that. So we're going to end up with a negative 47 plus 43 divided by 6. And it's also going to give us negative 47 minus 43 divided by 6. So if we clean those up a little bit, we're going to get down to negative 4/6 here, or we'll call that negative 2/3. And if here we clean this up, we're going to end up with a negative 90 over 6, which is going to clean up to be negative 15. Don't forget, these are points, so let's represent them as points. So we're going to get negative 2/3 in 0 because it's an intercept, and we're also going to get the point negative 15 in 0. So all said and done, you should have seen a couple of quick examples of how to use the quadratic formula. The nice and easy ones, which are rational, or Q, as we like to refer to them, as symbolically. All right, make sure that you check out any additional examples that I provide for you, and we'll see you in class.